Just before I go on with that electric motor, I figured I'd just give this thing a plug in and see if it's worth hanging on to, and what do you know, it powers up. I've got it hooked up to a battery. There was no power pack with it, so I'm guessing they lost the power supply for it. Everything else is working. It stays on, it doesn't shut down after a few seconds. I'll plug it into a source like a PC or something and just let it run for a while. Not bad considering it was thrown in the scrap bin. They're a cheap, nasty television, but hey, I ain't going to complain. If I can plug a security camera into it and stick it up in the corner, that's even better. Yeah, it's going for the PC RGB input, which it has. Kind of neat. Well, that looks alright. Fills up the desktop a little bit better. Plugged it into the same power supply that this monitor uses too. I'm not using the battery. The battery's sitting at 12.5 volts, which is perfect, but these can be run on battery or a power pack. But since I don't have a power pack for the other one, I figured I'd try that. And that's on battery. The internal pin on this plug is actually a little bit smaller. The other plug fit quite tightly, so that sort of explains it. But you'll find different banana plugs have different pin sizes on the inside. Sometimes they work, sometimes they won't. So this monitor won't accept that battery, but either way it'd still run. And if you want to get a bit more serious, then you go the big 40 amp hour sealed lead acid. This one's only 12 amp hour. It'd probably run it for quite a while anyway. LCDs don't use much juice. Only downside to this one is it's no higher than 1024 by 768, whereas things like this ViewSonic can run 1280 by, or was it, yeah, 1280 by 1024 and probably even higher. Alright, now that I've bored you with a uneventful LCD test which didn't end in smoke and flames, here's a shattered bearing shell. I'm going to have to get this ball bearing race off the hard way. I've just scored it with a grinder and smashed it. Always wear eye protection for that because this stuff comes off like glass. Very high speed fragments which will destroy your eyes. You can see been a lot of water in this bearing. It's very, very rusty. So I'm going to cut this cage off and probably score diagonally through this inner, and just try and split it with a cold chisel. You try and do that without damaging the rest of the stator too. I'll stick each end on a block of wood on the floor and then strike it. Or at least support it as close to the bearing as possible and just strike down. Don't damage the stator itself. They're pretty resilient, but you don't want to mess it up. But overall the rest of the motor cleaned up alright. Double check the windings and they're all good. The problem's going to be in here. The problem's the switch or capacitors, according to my electric motor specialist and a few people on YouTube as well. Your comments are spot on. It's a capacitor or switching issue. Alright, and if your motor happens to have bearing retaining plates on the shaft, whatever the hell you do, don't forget to put them back on before you put the bearings on. I have seen somebody do that before and they pretty much had to destroy 2 brand new bearings because they forgot to do this before they put the bearing on. Put the damn retainer on first. It always sucks when somebody does that. They forget to put the retainer on, they press or heat shrink one of these bearings on and they can't get it off without ruining it. So there goes $30 if you forget to put one of these retainers on. Well, actually it was $16 for this one, but the whole pair was $30. So still money well spent. This motor's going to clean up just nice. Get rid of some more of this rust. I gave it a quick polish in the lathe last night when I was cleaning the rust off here so I could try and pull this bearing off, but I ended up bending the bloody sprocket remover even more. I mean, yeah, literally bent the sprocket remover trying to pull this bearing off as a whole piece, so why not get the grinder out and cut the damn thing out. Alright, the new bearings are on. As I explained before, just use a piece of tubing like this 1-inch handrail tubing and only drive the inner race. It doesn't fit over this end, but a piece of old exhaust tubing, just fine. So you gently tap the new bearings on with a nylon hammer, make sure they're all in place, fully seated. Make sure your retainer's on, don't ever forget to put that on first. And then attach the end bells with the screws. This one here can go on first before the rotor goes into the motor at the stator, but sometimes they have these retainers at both ends and you just got to put it on and try and line them up. Usually the end bells have through holes in them so you can stick your finger in and line them up from the outside, but if you can't, you've got to screw these in first. So I'm going to screw this retainer in from the outside. I put a little bit of marine grease around the inside too, just so that any moisture doesn't try and attack the outside of this seal. It is a rubber sealed bearing as opposed to completely unsealed for the original ones. The worst part is they didn't even put grease nipples or other lubrication points on this thing, so you couldn't keep the water out just by pumping grease into it. It was a completely unsealed bearing with no external lubrication point at all, so it's kind of silly. So I'm using sealed bearings now, and they should last a good lifetime, at least the lifetime of the pump anyway, or whatever I put it on. Still don't know if the pump's any good, but we'll give it a try anyway. I gave it a good wash today. It's come up nice and clean. Oil type, a few people have suggested, including the pump guru that works at the scrapyard, it should really be a nice thin oil, not heavy gearbox oil. So it should really be something like ASEA 30 engine oil, or even Singer sewing machine oil type viscosity. Singer machine oil is extremely expensive, but I'll find something similar, maybe Auto Trans fluid. I'll start by draining it and putting ASEA 30 engine oil in it. Then I'll probably drain that shortly afterwards and replace it with some kind of extra thin machine tool oil. Maybe sliding surface oil for high pressure, high speed machine tool surfaces, or spindle oil. Alright, well the front main bell housing's in place, and you can clearly see from this end how the motor works. You have a iron laminated rotor which is sectioned into poles using cut slots with forged or pressed aluminum filler, which is non-magnetic. And these inner windings here are the run windings, 4 poles, 4 magnetic fields which alternate between each other. And these 4 outer ones, which are much coarser winding, are the start windings. So these outer 4 are energized momentarily by the switch. The start capacitor delivers a big charge through it. It's a big Bosch capacitor, which kick-starts the rotor at really high torque. Then the relay clicks out and these 4 take over. It's called capacitor start, capacitor run. So these windings are run by this capacitor here. It's almost like a 3-phase type system with this capacitor emulating a 3rd phase. Some motors only use capacitor start but no capacitor run. I don't believe they're as powerful as a capacitor start, capacitor run motor. But I'm not an electric motor expert at the moment. I do have a fair bit of experience with them, but I've never really bothered to work out the difference between the two. So, just got to get this next end bell on. Just putting a little lick of silicone around the outside to keep moisture out. I'm going to seal up this terminal box too. Love putting new bearings in things. Turns so smooth. Perfect. That's the way it should be. I did seal around the bearing housings with marine grease. That one there has a V-type lip seal between the fan and the housing. This end here I'll try and get another V-type lip seal to seal against the front bell housing and the shaft. Just prevent any kind of moisture ingress. As long as you don't try and clean the pressure cleaner with the pressure cleaner, you generally won't get water in these, but as soon as somebody tries to hose down the machine itself, it just pushes water into everything and ruins it. I'll never direct the high pressure spray at the machine itself. I'll let it get dirty and just keep the dirt on it. But at some stage somebody has directed the high pressure spray at this motor and it's forced water into various places and ruined it. So next step is we'll get this end housing washed and refitted and start looking at the electrics of it, because mechanically this motor's fine and windings wise the motor's fine. So it's purely a switching and capacitor issue now, and it should be a pretty easy fix, especially with the spares I keep on the shelf. G'day folks, well it's time for part 3 of the gurney repair. Pressure cleaner I suppose you'd call it. Still working on the motor. I've got it running a bit better now that I've cleaned up the terminals and done a bit of rewiring. Bearings were replaced in the last video and we'll give it a test fire. It still vibrates a bit like a single phase motor would, but it just jumps between run and start every now and then, so I'm thinking this relay's a bit trashed. Pull the plug out, and this is why you should always discharge a start capacitor on any kind of motor before you work on it. I've got my little wire already hooked up to the start cap. It's the blue and the brown. That is a very big bang. Like that's, yeah, more than enough to kill a man. If I put my fingers across that, it would kill me. Well, not my fingers, but one hand to the other so that the current goes across my heart, it would kill me. If I put my fingers across it on one hand, I probably wouldn't be able to use this hand for the rest of the night, and it would be extremely painful. So, yeah. A little bit of safety for the day. Discharge your start capacitors. I've never ever seen a run capacitor store charge, but then if you're really paranoid, you can discharge them too. But start caps, always discharge them before you start working on a motor. Even if the motor hasn't been used in ages, just discharge them anyway. Just short across them. I'm going blue to brown in this case, which is this wire here, and make sure it doesn't have anything going across it.